Well, I have a couple of questions for Gallagher, and he's going to be with us in just a few moments. But first, I'd like to go to Dr. Einat Wilf. Dr. Wilf, where do you see this conflict going, given the latest developments, given the fact that a rocket landed on the outskirts of Tel Aviv?
It certainly seems to be that Hamas is doing its utmost to ensure that a greater number of civilians is targeted. They are engaging in a crime of war by deliberately targeting civilians in Israel, including in its greatest city in Tel Aviv, and doing so while hiding behind civilians. Israel's responses for years have been very measured, very careful. Even now, when Israel decided to respond to months of rocket attacks, it did so by directly going after the person responsible for that. And we will try to respond in a way that is targeted, that goes against the missiles. I mean, if you look at it, for the last
Dr.
few
Wilf,
years,
pardon me for interrupting. The question I'm asking, Dr.
on?
Wilf, just a moment. The question
Sure.
I'm asking here is, what do you think is going to be Israel's answer to this latest development?
As I said, Israel tries to be very measured, very careful, and very prudent in its response, while Hamas is certainly not doing the same. We will examine the options. Certainly, I'm not the person, and even if I were, I would not say it here, what Israel's response will be. Ultimately, this operation has a very clear and internationally legitimate goal, which is that Hamas cease to attack Israeli civilians. I think it's a very simple goal. It's one that Hamas should have stopped doing years ago. It's one that is supported by all the major leaders in the world, clearly, who have put the responsibility. Yes.
Would you say a ground operation in the Gaza Strip has been made more likely by a rocket landing near Tel Aviv?
Israel has made it clear that it is prepared to engage in ground operation if necessary. But again, if anything, Israel has shown years of restraint, of prudence, of very careful response. And if Hamas understands tomorrow, in the next hour, that our goal is limited, just stop targeting our civilians, there will be no need to proceed beyond the current situation.
Law. It is simply murder.
Dr. Einat Wilf, you're listening in on this debate from Israel. I'd like to. We've been talking about the context. We asked why now. We asked whether the Israeli political schedule was an important factor in all of this. I'd like to broaden it out to the regional, international context. Your neighbor now, I'm talking about Egypt, is very different from the Egypt you knew the last time there was a full-scale conflict between Israel and the Gaza Strip. The United States has just asked Egypt to use its influence in the region to help pacify things. The Prime Minister of Egypt is headed to the Gaza Strip tomorrow. Is the new leadership in Egypt a factor in Israeli thinking today? Is that could that change your behavior, your decisions in any way?
It should certainly be a factor in the Gazans' thinking. I ask all of your viewers to open a map and notice that Gaza and Egypt share a border, clear, direct. And while some of the speakers here try to claim resistance to occupation, even though Israel is long gone for many years from the Gaza Strip, all they have to ask the Egyptian Prime Minister tomorrow is, please open the border between Egypt and Gaza. Last I recall, there's a Muslim Brotherhood rule in Egypt, a Muslim Brotherhood rule in Gaza. I don't see much brotherhood going on. The Egyptians are essentially keeping more than 1 million people hostages in order to deflect attention and to pressure Israel. Israel is more than welcoming any opening of the border between Gaza and Egypt, which will allow Gaza to have a very free life. Israel is not in Gaza. It has a partial maritime blockade against weapons only. In fact, I would argue, given that Gaza-ruled Hamas is enemy territory, the fact that we continue to enable trading and supply electricity is going above and beyond. So truly what should happen tomorrow
Dr. Wilf, is does Israel have as free a hand as it has had over the last few years in Gaza now that Egypt is ruled by the Muslim Brotherhood?
Israel never had a free hand and never had an interest in having a free hand. Israel left Gaza in order to never be there and never to return. People have mentioned that the Hamas seeks ceasefire, that it protects its civilians. Let me just tell you from the Israeli perspective what a Hamas ceasefire looks like. It is a continuous barrage of rockets on civilians, directly targeting civilians, and Israel exercising restraint. This is the Hamas definition of a ceasefire. When they're saying that they are protecting their civilians, let us look what they're spending their money on. They have used the last years in order to create an Iranian armed base in Gaza. We have spent billions on protecting our civilians, in purchasing Iron Dome, in making sure that our civilians are not hurt by these rockets. So we never had a free hand. We don't want a free hand. In fact, we have nothing to do with Gaza. We have left it in order not to be there. It is time for the Palestinians and the people of Gaza to finally take responsibility for themselves, for their fate. They are not refugees. They were born in Gaza. They have a future in Gaza. This is their state, their future, and they have a border with Egypt. And tomorrow to the Egyptian Prime Minister, they say, please open this border. He's responsible. All
right, Dr. Wilf, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all our panelists for coming on the France 24 debate this evening. That's all we have. That's all the time we have for this evening. But we'll continue to follow this developing story right here on France 24. Do stay tuned.